and Jenny were getting along really, really well, and it seemed like Ella was never happier. It seemed like she belonged. Well, lots of times Ella would go off to school, and Jenny, she had determined that long before they got married, that she wanted to spend as much time when Mark wasn't on assignment. Now, they didn't need the second income, so Jenny oftentimes would volunteer at different organizations. And for the last 5 years, she had volunteered at the Big Sisters organization. You see, it was her position to find and trying to match up the girls with the Big Sisters. Lots of times Ella would come home and there would be somebody there that would be a little sister that was kind of looking for a big sister. You see, what Jenny would do is she would often bring these young girls home just so that she could get to know them better, so she could place them within a proper placement. Well, Ella was not having a good day at school. Her teacher had each of the students stand up and read out loud. And because Ella wasn't a good reader, she stammered and stuttered, and she had trouble trying to remember the words. When she sat down, she heard some of the kids snicker, and one boy said, "She talks like a baby." Ella's face was like stone. She acted like it didn't bother her, but inside she wanted to scream, "You'd stutter and stammer too if your mom had died and you had to live in a foster home." But her face was as cold as stone. All she wanted to do was just get home and just be with Jenny, just her and Jenny alone. And when she walked into the house, there on the table were 3 plates. And she knew that another girl was coming home, and she yelled at Jenny, "Why do you have to have these dumb girls come over here? Why?" And she said, "What am you going to do? I'm going to have supper some night with you, and then you're going to send me off to another foster home that's going to be worse than Mrs. Rule's place." And she ran to her bedroom and she slammed the door. As she lay there on the bed sobbing, she was angry. She was frustrated, but more so, she was fearful. She was afraid that Jenny would send her off to some other home, and she really liked being there with Jenny. As she looked at her picture of her mom that she'd brought home from school, and Jenny and her had put it into the little frame, she thought, "Mom, why did you have to die? Why did you have to leave me?" You see, Ella and her mom was Ray. Ray Mitchell. And her mom worked at this little diner, and they lived in this little 2-bedroom apartment, and lots of times Ella's mom would bring home stuff from the diner that was left over. Other times, Ella would sit in one of the back booths, and she would either do her homework or she would color while her mom waited on the tables. And they didn't have a whole lot of money, and lots of times her mom would say, "One day, Ella, we're gonna do okay. We're gonna have lots of money." But it never happened. And as Ella was looking at her picture and remembering her mom, she remembered that her mom one morning woke up and she was coughing, and when Ella went in to see her, her face was all pale and she was sweating. And Ella had made some chicken noodle soup to help comfort and help her mom out. She ate a little bit of it, and the next morning when Ella came in to see if her mom was better, actually she was worse. And her mom said, "Ella, I think you need to call 911. I'm not feeling so well." Well, Ella called 911, but she was afraid. What would she do if they took her mom to the hospital? And when the lady from 911 came on the phone, Ella said, there's this sick lady in apartment 411B on Broadway Street. She's really, really sick. And when the lady from 911 says, and who's calling? Ella was so afraid she hung up. She went and unlocked the apartment door and she watched at the window. In a few moments, the police arrived and an ambulance arrived. And Ella went and hid in the closet behind her mom's winter coat. And she peeked out through a crack in the door. The police had knocked on the door, but Ella didn't answer. And the paramedics came in and Ella watched as they attended to her mom. They put her on a stretcher and they took her out. Ella was afraid that if they found out that she was there, that she'd be put in jail. So she was absolutely quiet. That afternoon, the police came back to the apartment and she heard the police say to the landlord that the lady in apartment 4711B had passed away. Ella was too sad to cry and too scared to cry. And she stayed in the apartment all by herself. She never answered the phone and she never talked to anybody. A couple of days later, Ella needed to go and buy some milk, and so she snuck out the back and down the back steps and went to the store to buy some milk. When she came back, the landlord had changed the locks on the apartment, and now she was homeless and she was left all alone. She thought, Mom, why did you have to die? She was sure that Jenny would kick her out. A couple of moments, there was a soft knock on the door. And Jenny said, Ella, are you okay? Can I come in? And when Ella opened the door, she jumped into Jenny's arms. She says, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said such mean things. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to be kicked out. I like being here. And Jenny led Ella to the bed and she sat down and she brushed away her hair. And she said, Ella, why are you so riled? Well, I had a really rough day today at school and I just wanted to come home to be with you, and the kids were making fun of me at school, and when I saw the third plate on the table I got all upset and I said some mean things and I'm sorry. I don't want to be kicked out. I don't want to leave here. I like being here. And Jenny says, hey girl, you're not going anywhere. I am glad to be your foster mom. And as long as you want, you can stay here. And Ella brushed away the tears and she said, promise? Jenny says, you can bet your bottom dollar that I promise that you're going to be here as long as you want. I am glad that you're here. Well, they hugged each other. And then Jenny says, look at Tracy is coming over. She is a brand new young lady, a young girl that I have to see if I can find a big sister for. I only have tomorrow and then I'm off for a couple of weeks because of Christmas. Let's not, you see, let's not let this little hiccup ruin it for Tracy or for you. Well, we can't change the plans now, and besides, Tracy would be heartbroken if she couldn't come after being all excited. Ella, I tell you what, help me get ready for supper, and you can be a good host and you can talk to Tracy. Maybe you can even play a game with her, and I promise that we'll talk. And Ella once more, she said, oh Jenny, I'm so sorry. Would you please forgive me for saying the mean things? Jenny said, Ella, I forgive you. Now, come on. Let's not let this little hiccup ruin the night for Tracy or for you. Well, Christmas was approaching rather quickly. And Ella was let out of school at noon hour. That meant that they were going to have Christmas vacation. Ella could hardly wait to make memories. Her and Jenny were cooking, and they were baking, and they were putting together Christmas baskets, and they were going to take them to the senior citizens at one of the homes. As they were talking, Jenny said, "Hey, Ella, do you know who's coming for Christmas Day?" And Ella shook her head. "No, it's Mark's mom and dad. They've been away on a trip and they're coming home Christmas Eve and they're excited to meet you. That's why they haven't been here, because they've been away." And Ella goes, What do I call them?" Well, down at the big sisters and big brothers parties, all the kids call them grandmom and granddad. I suppose you could call them that if you wanted to. Ella goes, "I haven't had any grandparents. Do you think they would mind if I called them grandmom and granddad?" And Jenny says, "Well, we can always ask them." Well, they were getting ready and getting lunch ready, and Jenny had just reached to grab a cookbook off the cookbook shelf to think of another Christmas baking that they could do together when there was a knock on the back door. And Jenny said, "Ella, can you go answer that for me, please?" Ella went to the back door and opened up the back door, and there was a man staring out in the backyard. And Ella whispered, "Mom, there's an army man here." And Jenny says, "Who is it?" And Ella says, "Mom, there's an army man here." Well, when Jenny came to the door, she screamed, "Mark!" And she jumped into his arms. "What are you doing here?" "Well, I've had a couple of months off, and I thought it would be a wonderful surprise to just come home and just greet you at the door." "Oh, Mark!" she agreed, and both of them started crying and hugging each other. Well, when Jenny screamed, "Mark!" Ella backed into the kitchen. Well, they both came in, and Jenny was hanging on to Mark's arm, and she had the biggest smile ever, and she said, "Oh, Mark, this here is Ella." When Mark looked at Ella, he had this shock on his face. Did he not know that she was here? Or was now that he was here that he would ask her to leave, or just want Jenny all to himself, or maybe, Jenny wouldn't want her here either now that Mark was here. And she burst into tears and she ran from the room. Jenny came and said, "What was that all about?" Mark shrugged. "I don't know. All I did was when I looked at her, it was like I was looking at my sister when she was 10 years old." And Jenny goes, "You mean Rebecca?" "Yeah, like Ella seems to be like a spitting image of my sister when she was 10 years old. Maybe the shock on my face kind of startled her. I don't know." Jenny says, "Oh, this is so wonderful. I'm kind of all mixed up here. I wasn't expecting you for the next 3 months, and now you're home here. Oh, come on, sit down and have some coffee. Oh, and I got some Christmas cookies here." And Mark sat down, and he goes, "Oh, well, I didn't mean to scare Ella. I really wanted to meet her." Well, Jenny called, "Ella, I need you to come here for a moment, please." And Ella come walking in solemnly. And she sat down at the table. She sat as far away as she could from Mark. And Mark said, "Ella, can I ask you some questions?" "Yeah, I guess so." And Jenny had put some milk and some cookies by Ella's spot, and Mark was at the other end of the table. And Mark looked at Ella and says, You look just like my sister. I haven't seen her in 12 years. My sister ran away, and we tried to find her, never could find her. And you look a lot like her. Can I ask you some questions? And Ella looked at Jenny, and she looked at Mark, and Jenny kind of nodded her head. Mark says, what was your mom's name? Ella said, my real mom died. And Mark was sad to hear about his real mom dying, her real mom dying. But Ella said, yeah, my real name, my mom's real name was Rebecca Mitchell. And Mark said, well, what about your father? Do you know anything about him? No, my mom said that he was a real jerk, and I never met him even before I was born. He was out of the picture. Well, what do you have any memories? Can you tell me about your mom's family? Well, in the months before Mom died, she told me stories about my family. We used to live in this big house, and it was a nice house, and she had a dog that followed her all around, and she said that my grandpa was really nice, and that I was named after my grandmother, and she had a brother, and she called him Sherlock. Mark was like, seriously? Do you know what your mom's name was? Do you know what your grandmother's name was? And Ella said, yeah, Mom called me after my grandma. She said her name was Eleanor Mitchell. They couldn't believe the coincidence. And Mark was like dumbstruck. He was like, seriously? And Jenny looked at Ella, and she looked at Mark. Could it be? They seemed to have the same green eyes. And they seemed to have the same mannerism, in a way they would cock their head. And she was thinking, could they really be part of the family? And Mark says, you are so lucky to be here with Jenny. You're one lucky girl. And Ella goes, does this mean that you're not kicking me out? Of course we're not kicking you out. Both Mark and Jenny said, we want you here. Well, I guess then I can go and unpack my clothes. And so she jumped up and she danced down the hallway. She was humming a Christmas tune. And Mark sat there, and he said, this is such a coincidence. It's more than a coincidence. It was like, my mom's name, her maiden name before she married Dad, was Eleanor Mitchell. He goes, Jenny, I think that Ella could be my niece. Well, and Jenny goes, really? Seriously? And Mark, because of his inquisitive nature, he says, I've got to get to the bottom of this. I've got to figure out this crazy idea that I have in my mind. So Jenny called Ella back in. Ella, can you come into the living room, please? And Ella came in. She says, we have some news. I don't think it's bad news. At least I hope it's not bad news. We need to let Mark tell you the rest of the story. Some of your answers were really, really interesting. And Mark said, and you know what I think what clinched it for me? When you said that your mom had a brother and she called him Sherlock. That's what she called me all the time. She says, you're going to grow up to be a spy and you're going to be a Sherlock. And the other thing was that my parents called her Becky. But I called her, I said, you're my sunshine. You're a ray of sunshine. And I believe that your mom took on the name of Ray. And Mitchell, that was Mom's maiden name, and that was her middle name. You could be my niece. And Ella goes, she looked at Jenny and she looked back at Mark, and her head was wagging back and forth, and she said, I don't understand how. Well, we really need to make sure. Now, we could go to the Army base at the hospital there, and they could do some tests to determine whether you're actually part of my family or not. And Ella goes, will the test hurt? Nah, all they'll do is they'll just take a cotton swab and they wipe it inside of your mouth, and then they send the saliva off to the lab to make sure that our DNA is working together. She says, what do you think? Ella, the sooner we find out, the sooner we get the results. And Ella goes, if my DNA is like yours, does that mean I'm part of your family? I belong to you? Mark says, yeah, I think so. Then if it's not going to hurt, then I think, yeah, I want to find out for sure. Well, Mark says, well, let me make a phone call. And so he called the Army base, and that afternoon, they went to the hospital. When they got to the hospital, Mark was right. The DNA test didn't hurt. It actually tickled when they stuck that thing inside of their mouth and walked it around a little bit. Ella and Jenny were out in the waiting room, and Mark went to Private Jones. He says, Private Jones, is it possible to get these tests back as quickly as possible? Well, sir, you really can't. You can't rush science, but I'll do my best. I'll put a sticker on it as a priority, and maybe I'll call you as soon as I can. Well, on the way home, Mark said, who's up for ice cream? I think that celebrating with my family is going to be a wonderful time. Ella couldn't believe it. Here, Jenny's husband, and they'd only met Ella like just a couple of hours ago, and he said that she was part of the family. Well, they hadn't got the test back yet, and would he still want her even if the test didn't show positive? Or they matched? Well, she couldn't do anything about it, so she was going to have bubble gum and Smartie ice cream. And in winter? Seriously? How unbelievable is this?